found as a teacher was that these were usually faith-based books in the classroom. So the Sikh identity was always represented as the child who goes to the Gurdwara, the child that follows certain traditions. And I wanted to open that market further to represent children that represent the Sikh identity, but also to ensure that they could be included in everyday books, in regular stories that the publishing industry creates. This need to learn something new really motivated me to gain a deeper understanding of the deaf community for myself, my own personal experience, and at the same time it gave me an opportunity to reflect on my son's whole identity. I didn't know very much about the deaf identity at all when we learned about our son, and so that told me as a human being that, you know, we have to learn about so many other people and cultures, you know, in order to make sure that we can be good global citizens too. And that became my motivation to write A Lion's Mane. It was to overcome those fears of the unknown. I didn't know very much about the deaf community, and I thought, you know what, we should give an opportunity for people to learn about the Sikh identity too in different ways. And I started writing A Lion's Mane, and that's how that came about. My perspective comes obviously from a mother, but also as a teacher. I've found many challenges along the way to get to the point where we could actually publish the book. It raises a good question, because over the years, I began writing many years ago for children, but it really became evident that in mainstream publishing, it made me raise the question, why isn't the Sikh identity already being represented equally? And I found that a lot of that comes from the fact that the Sikh identity is still not very well understood in the mainstream industry, and so publishers tend to steer away from an identity that they feel that their main market won't understand. So in a way that it really is a collective force of all of us who are here today to ensure that we can push forward, just like the black publishing industry did, just like the Latino industry and the Asian industry had to do. They all had to meet the need for representation. So some of the challenges include that, just to get away from the stigma of independently published books, and also to meet the challenge of distribution, because once you do publish books, especially books that represent an identity that may not be very well known, it becomes very difficult to distribute unless you are a very large publisher and you have all of the network in place. So I feel that for myself anyway, that one of the largest roadblocks has been distribution. And that's something obviously that I think that's still going to take a lot of time to work through. I knew from my experience of researching the publishing market over the last 10 years that publishing A Lion's Mane through a traditional publisher, or even going through a literary agent, which is the norm for normal submission processes, it would be near impossible, because I would have to make my message fit the mainstream if I even wanted to be considered. And the Sikh identity does not fit in. We stand out. So if I knew that if A Lion's Mane was going to be published, I would have to design the entire project to sit alongside any traditionally published book. And that was my greatest challenge, and hopefully that's been a success as well, because we really did work hard to ensure that it would have the same quality and go through the same publishing process as any traditionally published book. I feel like it doesn't mean that I didn't try through the traditional publishing market, because I feel that if you are motivated as authors and artists, you absolutely should try going through the traditional publishing market too. And it is opening up a little bit more, but there's still a lot of room to grow. So I hope that people will be inspired to say, yes, you know, we are going to move forward. We're going to try and get into the traditional publishing market too, and ensure that our voices and our images are represented authentically. As far as future plans, I feel that this is very much the beginning right now. And as you'll hear from the other participants today, that we have a lot that we are doing collectively, and hopefully we can just continue to say that these are our voices. Now you join the conversation, you bring your voices to this conversation too, because you have that opportunity to make a difference. I found that one of the challenges I do want to touch upon before I move on to the future plans is that as a teacher, I found a huge cultural difference between moving from Ontario to BC, where in Ontario I found that I could talk about the Sikh identity and the Dastar very much within the curriculum framework and be able to talk about it from the perspective of critical literacy. But when I have brought that perspective to BC schools, it seems that it's almost taboo to talk about a faith identity in the classroom. And I think that's the greatest challenge, because if we're going to move forward and try to educate people, especially after what we saw in Wisconsin, if we want to go forward educating people about who we are, what the Sikh identity represents, our educators have to be open to inviting that conversation into the classroom as well. We have to ensure that we give a voice to that in the classrooms and ensure that people at the district level understand the importance of that. As far as future plans, Lion's Mane was published in 2009 and has done very well, thankfully. Thankfully to the support of our great readers. And Dreams of Hope was released last June, which is a very different story. It represents the visible Sikh identity through a father's lullaby to his daughter. I know fathers aren't often shown as the caregivers or the people who, do that ritual at night and put the children to sleep. And I thought, it exists in our community, and why shouldn't we celebrate that? It encompasses an inherent respect for the global world, including our environment. Given this is kind of a mompreneur endeavor, the pace is controlled to ensure quality products can be published. So I definitely have a vision to continue our journey to authentically represent our children's voices, and also support parents and teachers at the same time through downloadable educational resources on my site. I feel that there's still a need for more voices to be represented, especially when it comes to strong women. I feel that we often get that feedback that, we really want to see girls represented. We definitely want to see, strong girls and mighty girls represented in the stories as well. And I absolutely agree with that. But from the perspective of being a mother to a son, I also feel that it's extremely important that we learn to raise our sons well to respect women. And I think that's part of my responsibility as a mother to a son. I definitely want my son to grow up knowing how to represent and respect women. I think I will pass it over to Jasmine Penji now.
Okay, thank you very much, Navjot Penji. I think this gives all of us a good view of where you began, where you're coming, and where you're going. So I'm now going to pass it on to Inni Penji, who will begin her career.
Thank you, Navjot. That was really quite heartwarming to hear your story. And I'd like to start by thanking the Institute, the SikhRI Institute, for creating this platform where high-quality educational materials and resources are being highlighted for the first time within our community. I feel each one of us panelists and who are participating in this webinar has a unique story. Certainly Navjot's is, heartwarming that she started because of her son who was deaf. So the question comes, where did my story start? And my story started around my husband's birthday dinner. As I watched our girls tease him relentlessly by repeating all the bedtime stories he read to them. They had memorized them. And I just watched the scene. yes, there was joy at watching them tease him and playing with him, but there was a deep sadness. And the sadness was that I realized that I had made a mistake. In fact, I had made a colossal mistake, and that their bedtime stories should have been stories about the gurus, because I knew that they would have remembered them, like they had remembered all the Peter Rabbit stories. But then back then, there were no books which I could share with them, which were of the quality of the Peter Rabbit and Angelina the Ballerina and, you know, of that nature. So how could I put in their little hands a book on the gurus which was, in my opinion, poorly written and even more poorly published? The difference was so stark that I chose not to share those books with them or tell them about it. Instead, I would share the stories on the, about the gurus orally with them. And that was my time with them, talking to them about the Sakhi. But that was my story. And that day I realized that I had to do something about it. And I embarked on a 4-year journey before the first volume was published, that I had to create a series or create a book or do something that was available to other parents so that they would not make the same mistake that I made. At least there would be a tool out there that if they so chose to read a Sakhi, they would be proud to hold it and share it with their child. That was my motivation behind it. Has there been challenges? Yes, many, because each one of us, I think, at some point in our lives, grew up hearing these stories about the gurus in their own way, and it has a, you know, a unique way. The grandmother told me, and of course there was a twist, or the father shared it. So reading these stories, all of a sudden in this book, a lot of times I got the feedback, but that's not how I remember them. And it is true, that is not how you remember them, or it may not even be true how I remembered them. But I had to start somewhere, and this was my way of retelling the story in a way which the children could understand. My focus, my audience was and is the Sikh children in the West, 7 and above. And this is geared to them. It is not geared to the parents. This is not certainly not geared to the grandparents. It is geared to the children, Sikh children in the West. Now, Joe touched upon the challenges. And yes, she's right. The challenges of finding a publisher who would publish Journeying with the Gurus was amazing. I mean, the point, flat out I was told, no one would pay that price for a book of this nature. Can you not have that many images? There is no need to have discussion points. You do not need to go the route of this paper. You do not need to have the type in that typeface. We could do it really, really small. After having listened to all of that, I decided I wasn't going to agree with the mainstream publishers. And these mainstream publishers are also publishers in India. And these mainstream Indian publishers, yes, even if I did all what they had suggested, recommended, and everything, there was one overruling factor which I was not to allow them that control. They wanted editing control. The final editing control was going to be theirs, and I would have no say, and there was no way I was willing to do that. So that ended that conversation, and went about publishing it on my own. And realized then the challenge which Navjot spoke so beautifully about was the distribution. Now you've produced this book, yes, you've been creative, yes, you found the illustrator, but now how do you distribute these books? Have done that successfully, I would say, with Journey with the Gurus Volume 1. Volume 2 just came out in June and is relatively doing well. The route has been through the Gurmat schools around the country. But I would still say it is a challenge because we need a distribution system. So to all the, would love your input at how do we create a mechanism to distribute, would be wonderful for everyone. What I am working on right now is Volume 3. Chapter 4 of Volume 3 has been done. But besides that, I am also working on a bilingual short story project on the Gurus, on Guru Nanak, which seems to be needed in the community, the Punjabi and the English version. I'm also very, very aware of this deep need of creating material for the mainstream because of a couple of professors of children's literature have spoken to me in a way that has shaken me, and I want to share a line with you which moved me deeply. They said, "You are invisible in children's literature," which means is that Sikh identity is not represented at all in mainstream literature. And until we are not represented, we are invisible. So along those lines, I have also completed 2 books for mainstream, but we come to the challenge of funding. So the manuscript is written, but the illustrations haven't been done, and I am working to find an illustrator and see if I can get funding to produce those 2 books. I think that says it all, and I'd like to pass the microphone back to Jasmine Kaur.
Thank you, Inni. Again, it's definitely inspirational to hear the 2 stories so far, how they came and what the challenges are. And already we're starting to notice that some of those successes and challenges are similar in ways, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more of a discussion on that as people are starting to think about questions. I am now going to move it on to Jagdeep Singh Virji. And Virji, I'm going to put up your slides in just a minute. And please go ahead and take it from there. You should be unmuted, so you should go ahead and be able to speak. We can't currently hear you, though. Virji? I'm going to also unmute Kaur, who is part of the team. Maybe she can let us know if she has heard anything from Jagdeep. Kaur, I've unmuted you.
It's been great listening to everybody speak so far. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, what happened to our author here.
Maybe, Harley, what we can do is we can move to Parveen Kaur-Panji, and maybe you can figure out with Jagdeep how things are going, and then we can come back to your slides. Would that be okay?
That'll be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. Parveen Kaur-Panji, I'm going to move it to your slide so that you can then take it from here, and then we can come back to VG once we figure out what the plan is. Go ahead, Parveen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Parveen Kaur, and first of all, Navjot and Inni, Auntie, thank you very much. I had an even Chota, I have all of these books in my children's library, and they're all books that we go back to over and over again and that have actually had a big impact on my children's lives. So I enjoyed listening to both of those, and I'm looking forward to the next one as well.
Parveen, can you speak up a little bit louder, please? Sorry.
Yes, I usually have the opposite problem. Okay. Okay, so I was born in Virginia, and I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. And can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. And as a child, I was part of a very active Sangha, and especially when it came to Gurdwara-related events or activities. But the only resources that I remember, aside from Gurmukhi-related ones, were the Sikh comics that we used to get when we went to India, or the Hemkund speech competition books, and I always found them very difficult to relate to. As a kid, I enjoyed going to Sikh camps and loved spending time with my Sikh peers, and just love that feeling of pride and identity that you had after spending so much time with people who are just like you, or they've had the same faith. Later, when I was older and I was getting my master's in education from the University of Virginia, I helped develop the curriculum for Loger Camp in Pennsylvania. And at that time, I remember so clearly being 22 years old and thinking, wow, the resources haven't changed much from when I was growing up for the kids that I was now teaching who were 6 and 7 years old. And I remember even at that time thinking, well, this needs to change. I was getting my master's. I was in the height of technology and education, and I wanted to make a difference. So I was busy with my own world, and I didn't, it wasn't until after I had my own children that I actually decided that I needed to make resources myself for my kids and other Sikh children around, and that's how my first Sikh books were born. As you mentioned before that, post 9/11, I worked on The Sikh Next Door, which was meant for older children. It was more like 7th grade and above. And so after I had my little ones, I realized how important it was to have a resource where they can see themselves and where the Sikh identity was prevalent from a very young age. My first Sikh books, they're a set of board books that present a positive image for Sikh children that they can relate to, and for them to be proud of their identity. I started reading to my children from the first few days that they were born, and so that's why I consider the age for these groups to be birth and up. The images in the book, they're very contemporary. They show a Kaur recycling. They show a Singh breaking leaves. They show them playing sports, standing with their hands folded, looking at the Golden Temple. They show them helping the elderly. They're playing with friends. And they're all images that kids can actually relate to. And I worked hard on trying to look at my own children. I have, the reason I created these books, as I said, is I have 3 children. Right now, I have a 10-year-old son, an 8-year-old daughter, and a 5-year-old daughter. And when Zoravar, my 10-year-old, when he was a baby, and like Navjot just said, I had a son. So for me, I was very aware of his identity, and I was very aware of the fact that I needed to create something so that he can share with his friends at school, and he can share with his community, his sports friends on the soccer field or wherever he is. He can share with them who he is. And so I created these books, and they were meant for my own children. They were meant for my own children, and I went to Kinko's, made my own version of the books for my kids. And I had all the terms that were important highlighted for their teachers. And after I had Zoravar, I realized 2.5 years later, I had my daughter, and realized that, you know, her identity is just as important, and it's just as important for her to be proud of who she is and important for her to understand how beautiful having long hair is, how beautiful being a Kaur is, how beautiful the values of seva and helping others is for her as well. So I created my first Kaur book, and now they're put together, and I'll tell you why I did that. The three primary objectives for these books are to introduce simple concepts about our faith to children. They're not intended to be a complete guide. It's just a high level of introduction for that young age. And kids, it's also, the second reason is it gives kids a mirror to themselves where they can feel proud. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we need to show children, our Sikh children, that they need to be proud of who they are. Boys and girls are different. The way we want them to see themselves is equally important, but it has to come through different ways. And that's why I wrote 2 separate books for them. And for those of you who have the books, you'll see the concepts are very similar. They all touch on the exact same universal values, but the images are different, and the way they both deal with those issues are a bit different. And that's not to say that girls cannot be brave and proud and strong. They can do everything that the boy book can do, and the boys can do everything that the girl book can do, but they're just different. Let's see. The books, the challenges that I've had with the books, this one's tough. I think it's similar to what everyone else has said about the books just being, the distribution method for the books is the toughest. So I won't go more on that. I think another problem within our community is that a lot of times people feel that everything should be free, and there ends up being very little incentive to produce high quality products when people will not buy them for the price that they are. I believe that it stifles innovation, and I hope this generation, they'll appreciate the value of important resources and pay for them. These are nonprofit efforts, but producing these books do cost money, and I think that that's one of the challenges. I enjoy talking about the successes more, so I mean, of course, the greatest success, one of them would be when little Kaurs and Singhs come running to me and their parents tell me that these are their favorite books, and a 1-year-old just looks at the Patka boy in the book and they just feel so proud, and it ends up being the book that they want to read every day, every moment they keep bringing to their parents. And I love hearing about siblings reading the books to their younger ones. And on Facebook, when I get pictures that people from across the world actually have sent me, that's always a very proud feeling. But earlier this year, we were invited by the city of San Jose, which is the 10th largest city in the United States, to present the invocation on behalf of the Sikh community to their entire city council. And it was a very proud moment since it was televised live, and thousands of students and schools and individuals were able to relate to the universal values that Sikh teaches, and they were able to see Sikh children doing the invocation for this very honorable invitation. And also, more recently, after the Wisconsin tragedy, when I was told by the vice mayor of Fremont, California, that she read my first Sikh books at a vigil that was organized by the city of Fremont, I was so touched and felt honored that they could relate to the simple yet strong message of the Sikh faith through these books at such a challenging time for our whole nation. So my future plans. Currently, I'm engaging with app developers to introduce Sikh concepts into their applications that our children can see themselves in, so that they can see themselves in mainstream quality applications. So most recently, we were able to work with Darren Carson from Math Doodles, and he included Gurmukhi script in this fun and challenging math applications. And if you haven't checked it out, it's called Math Doodles, and you can get it on your iPad and iPhone. But That's one place that I would like to see more available, because I know that that's what my children enjoy doing. They like being on the iPad. They like being on their iPhone. So just seeing us include Sikh related or Gurmukhi related stuff in mainstream apps would be great, is what I'm leaning towards. And then also I'm working on other resources, books to help young Sikh children relate to their experiences with their friends in schools. So more multicultural versions of the books that I've already created. Thank you.
Thank you, Parveen Benji. Again, this is inspirational, and it's good to kind of see that this idea of need and technology and the app, that's something that's already been starting to think about, because we definitely we do need it. So, and I'm sure, again, I'm hoping that some of those questions will be coming up as well. I think I have notification from Harliv that for some reason Jagdeep hasn't been able to come on back to us. So we will have Harliv Kaur, who I can personally say, it's been an absolute pleasure. I work with her day in and day out, and so she is going to be representing the Chota and other Sikh nursery rhymes. So Harliv, I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to move to your slide, and welcome on board. A little bit about Harliv, since we weren't able to let you know about her. Harliv has had her degree in education, and her focus is on language skills particularly, and she has been a very active member of the Sikh Research Institute in the education team, starting with developing, being a developer on the Sikh curriculum, as well as presenting workshops and webinars and strategic planning for the education, the K-12 education focus. So Harliv Kaur, here are your slides. Please go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine.
Harliv, you might have you're going to have to speak up a little bit louder, though, please. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
You seem a little bit distant.
Okay, sorry about that. I had tried to make things a little bit quieter on my end.
Maybe
how's that?
Yes, much better.
Much better? Okay. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about how this project came to be about. These are some of Jagdeep Paji's notes. I'm sure I probably won't do it as justice as Paji would have. First of all, Paji ne Punjabi vich ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਸੀਗੀ, and so I'll try to share a couple of the stories that he was going to share. So Ek Chota Bacha and other Sikh nursery rhymes, this is actually Jagdeep Singh's project, something that he had started writing children's kavitas over 14 years ago. And as the other speakers had mentioned, his inspiration was also his firstborn, his daughter Avni. When she was born, he decided to come up with a kavita, and he was trying to figure out, well, what kind of message does he want to share with his young daughter, who was about 2.5 at the time. And he could have just done, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and just created a translation of it. But he thought, more importantly, he wanted to share Sikh values through sharing this kavita. So the very first kavita he wrote was Tumkila Chota Tara Hai, and in there he shares the importance of, telling the truth and just being a good person. So as I mentioned, that kavita was written 14 years ago, and at that time, Ujjwal Singh Memorial Foundation, they were getting ready for their annual Sikh Children's Day. And when one of the children had presented this kavita at Sikh Children's Day, a lot of the parents, they came up to him and they said, well, we want more of these. We want our children to enjoy these. So Jagdeep Singh got busy, and he started writing more kavitas year after year, where children were presenting these at Sikh Children's Day every year. And then about 3 years ago, Sikh Research Institute invited him to come out for the Sikh Education Conference, and he presented Ek Chota Bacha at that conference. And I guess my little proud moment was my daughter, my 2.5-year-old daughter, Bani Kaur, she presented that kavita. And after the, sorry, she's here with me right now. So after they got done with their workshop, a lot of the attendees asked him to create a book or a CD of these kavitas. And I think that's where this project really started. And then so in 2009 we had the conference, and then we began our project in 2010 and trying to find an illustrator and putting our team together. And then our book was released in 2011. And in a year and a half, we've sold about 3,000 copies worldwide. And we've had a great response. I mean, the international community has just been so generous with, with support. As Parveen Fenji mentioned, we love getting feedback from people who are enjoying these books and kavitas with their families. We've gotten some YouTube videos of kids singing, performing these kavitas for family and friends and things like that. And we always love seeing pictures and videos, so keep sending those in. But the response has been tremendous, and we're hoping to release more products, and hopefully in the next, by the end of the year. So let's see how it goes. I'm sorry, I really was hoping Jagdeep would have presented today, so I'm sorry, I'm a little unprepared.
No, Harlip, that was great. I think it does give your story as well of how Chota came to be. I think personally, from a Sikh Research Institute aspect, we're honored that the Sikh Education Conference triggered this a little bit more, even though I know there were conversations that happened before that as well. So thank you very much, and even though you were kind of put on the spot, you didn't need any preparation, so don't worry about that. And so thank you so much to each one of you, Navjot Panji, Inni Panji, Parveen Panji, and Harlip. These resources are just so important on a personal level. I've been in Sikh education for over 10, 15 years, but it's not till 6 months ago when I had my own children, these resources have become so much more important to me. And in each one of you, when each one of you were talking about it, it showed that your inspiration really came from your own children. And I think the beauty of Sikhi is that somehow every single child in the community becomes our own child when we start embarking on these kind of endeavors. And Inni Benji, for example, had said that even though her daughters were now older, she just knew, she realized that there was no question that we needed resources for the upcoming generation. Both Navjot Benji and Parveen had said, we need this in the mainstream so that regardless of whether someone is a Sikh or a non-Sikh, that these values can then be shared. And I just, to me, even though very idealistic, if we were able to get these values across the world, then what kind of a wonderful world would it be? So it's not just about creating these high-level, high-standard resources. It's about creating and making a change in the world at large. And everyone in their own little way is doing this, even though the challenges are quite extreme. I do want to share, recently we had done, we had our Sikh leadership program called SikhRI, and at this program, at the leadership program, we had done one workshop where we had broken down the participants into groups and paired them up with a few children. And we said, create a resource for children. And they only had, granted, they only had about an hour and 15 minutes to go through and come up with a concept. And they had material that, they had markers and they had construction paper, so they had to create a resource. And even in that small time, they realized that this is not easy. The challenges that come with one aspect of, the marketing and the developing and the creating is one thing, and the challenge of, are each and every kid, is every kid going to enjoy this? Is every kid going to, appreciate this? If this is what the community needs, is such a challenge. So they really were able to, in such a short time, get that. So to each one of you, to each one of your teams, I want to say congratulations. You've embarked on a major task, and you're going to get challenges. But, it is also time for us to talk about some of the difficult things. These are fantastic resources, but there's a long way to go. So I want to hear, particularly from the attendees, what kind of questions do you have for each one of these panelists, and what you feel they should be embarking on? How do you think they should be going more so, on the route that you see our community as well as the mainstream community needs? So feel free to send me your questions, in the question panel. In the meantime, maybe I can ask a question that I had, is that, one of the questions that I had, and Inni, you mentioned a little bit to it, and Chota has a little bit of this, is that when is the right time to introduce Punjabi resources that are equivalent to English resources? And when I say that, is what I mean is currently we mainly have resources that are in English for either the mainstream community or internal community. When is the right time? And Ek Chota Bachcha particularly is what I would consider a Punjabi resource, particularly for the internal community. What kind of things do we need to do to develop the language aspect for our children? Because the fact of the matter is that young mothers and fathers today are able to have conversations with their children in English very comfortably, but are we a little bit afraid as a community that we're going to lose the Punjabi conversation that we can have with the kids as they grow older? So that's just something that I'm throwing out to each one of you panelists to share, that is it a right time, or are we doing fine to continue with more English resources and very few Punjabi resources? Or, how do you want to, what are your plans? What are your thoughts on this?
I'd like to speak to that if that's okay.
Sure, please do.
I would think that you can introduce Punjabi at any time. I think the earlier the better, because of course you want a child to be able to pick up the language as early as possible. So if you have that, you have the opportunity to raise dialogue with your child in Punjabi, I think you should be doing that alongside English as much as you possibly can. We see that happening in the French system. We see that happening in many other cultures where they speak bilingually at home, and they introduce bilingual text at home as well. So I don't think there's ever the right time. I think you have to look at what the right time is for your individual family, because of course everybody has their own experience to deal with. I know that with our son we introduced Punjabi books very early on, and we also introduced translations of English books that were translated into Punjabi, and the challenge I found was that the language was so difficult for him to understand that it became something that he didn't want to read. And so I think if we want to ensure that we can raise that dialogue at home, that we have to create text that is accessible.
Thank you. Inni or Parveen, have you heard?
Well, I would agree with what Navjot said, but I would say that the first thing would be creating some board books with simple, not like the Keda, but a little bit above the Keda, where a bird is doing something. It's just the board books which we are proud to carry with simple words, which becomes the norm. Unless we don't make it a norm, it's not going to happen. And unless the texts are not of a quality, of high quality as what is available in the West, that is not going to happen, because the children, even at a young age, will get that message that our work, this language, is substandard. It's all about what is the impression which is lasting to the child. How do you get them to treat the books? So I would really like someone to come up with picture books with board books in Punjabi with simple concepts, like my first textbooks. If that could be translated into Punjabi as a separate set, it would be great. I mean, do it both ways. But I think that sort of thing, that book particularly done bilingually, would be ideal. Something to throw to you, Parveen, your next project.
Thank you. So I've actually thought about your question a lot because of the ages that my children are. And so I obviously grew up speaking English. I married someone who was born and raised in America as well, but both of our families spoke to us in English, but we grew up knowing and understanding Punjabi, but not always required to speak back to our parents in Punjabi. We spent a lot of our time speaking to our grandparents in Punjabi, and now that our children we have second generation Sikh Americans, our children are, it's something that I do think about a lot, and I think it's the easiest, by the way, to talk to your children in Punjabi from the moment that they're born, because the older they get, the more difficult it becomes. I think that for my children consistently from like 0 to 4, especially with my first one, we did a lot of like cute talk in Punjabi, or we would translate things and make our own little nursery rhymes up for him in Punjabi. And so that's one thing that I think it's easier to do when they're younger, and it gives them that exposure. Through music, my children listen to a lot of Punjabi, and I think being bilingual is always such a plus. One thing is, I'm a huge book fan, so we do have a lot of books like Brown Bear, Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes. We have a lot of these books that are translated in Punjabi already, and you can buy them. They're mainstream books that they just translate in different languages, and Punjabi is one of them. And I love those for my children. They're very, very good, and we use them in Khalsa school. So that's definitely a resource out there. I think with a lot of the resources that are coming out right now, the reason they're not in Punjabi is because you really want to create a strong Sikh identity in our children. And we're working on identity versus language, which I understand that I understand that they're related in many ways, but I don't think that they're I think that when resources are just in English, I think that they still have a huge value. And I know that even for my books, like Inni just said, a lot of people have told me that I need to have them in Punjabi, or why didn't you write them in Punjabi? And my answer is, I would love to in the future, but for right now, they're made for my children and for kids like them. And even in India, I mean, they're being sold over there, and even over there, they're doing well in English, but I mean, having them in Punjabi, because they are such a simple message, would definitely be beneficial.
Right. Absolutely, and by no means do I mean that these were not needed. I think the way Inni put it is that this is the Punjabi version is also needed, perhaps.
Yes,
Just
yeah,
for us to help develop the young children with their vocabulary and their language. Jagdeep Virji is back. So Jagdeep Virji, if you would shed a little bit light on this, since I know you were actually going to do your presentation in Punjabi as well. So, do shed some light on this for us. That when do you think is the right time to start introducing or start bringing in more Punjabi language focused books?
I apologize first of all. ਮੇਰਾ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਇਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਬੱਚਾ ਜੰਮਦਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਜਾਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਸਕੂਲ ਟੀਵੀ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਲੈਣੀ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੋਲਣੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਰੂਲ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਸਿਰਫ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਮਾਹੌਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਣ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਉਹ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਸਕਣਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੋਕੈਬਲਰੀ ਘਰ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਮਿਲਣੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਧਰ ਬਾਹਰੋਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਣੀ
Parveen, did you want to add anything? I mean, wonderfully, you're part of this discussion as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely a need for those resources, and one of Kikli's goal is to create a lot of Punjabi resources. But Parveen Penchi had mentioned this a little bit earlier. Okay, the problem is in our community, it hasn't really embraced the idea of paying for high quality books. So I don't think it's a problem finding writers or illustrators to create these books. I think the problem is just the acceptance of these type of products from our community. Okay, Tika, and I think a lot of us we agree that the international community definitely has embraced a lot of our books or CDs, but the problem is that I don't know how well the Punjabi resources would do, but I would definitely want to give it a shot.
Sure. Any other questions or comments from either the panelists themselves or any attendees? We would love to hear from you. So the other question I think that's come up is most of these resources have a good spread of ages, all the way from birth to, let's say, about 12 years old. But I think the focus ends up becoming a little bit on the younger ones because that's where most of the imagery can take place. That's where most of the, the colorfulness can come. What, in your opinion, and both, actually a lot of you, as your kids are growing older, what is it that, what kind of resources do you see in the future for perhaps the, 12 plus age group? There is, in my opinion, there's something really nice for the younger age group, and there's something fairly good that's come out of the, even though, a little bit of stronger literature that's come out from some of the movements for the older kids. But how about the 12 to 16 age group? What are your thoughts on that particularly?
I think that's another very, very important age group to target because they're usually at an age where they're struggling with identity and they're struggling with peer pressure and lots of other things are going on during that time in their lives. So I think if they could have books that tell their story, I think that would be very powerful. It would be a powerful message to send that their lives and their experience are valued just as much. And I hope that there will be people out there who are on that path already to write those stories and try to get those published because I feel that there's definitely a need for those.
Anyone else?
I think that's a tough age group in general.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes. You said that's a tough age group in general.
Yeah, I think it's a tough age group in general because, I mean, as, again, my 10-year-old son, he's in that age group, and a lot of times they aspire, they want things that, you know, their reading level is much higher, but then I mean, I would love to see more Sikh resources for that age, and I don't think we have it. I offhand can't even think of any. Journey with the Gurus is perfect for the age that he's in right now, and I love having that resource out there because, I mean, even for me as a mom at the age that I'm at, it's a great resource, but maybe more of that type or even higher than that would be great.
I'd like to throw something out there. I think we need to have, you know, engage the authors who are already writing for that age group. And this I talk about the mainstream authors and everything. And work with them to see how they can bring in a Sikh character in their books. To me, that is a win-win situation because the series are out there, their names are out there, and they're just introducing somebody else, which I think is a lot more powerful than creating a series or creating books just with the Sikh message or the identity. It's just a thought. So, you know, in a way I am saying that that the people who know of authors, mainstream authors who are writing for the teen and above series, is to start a conversation with them. Particularly after what has happened in Wisconsin, is that would you consider bringing in, you know, because we are in a multicultural, we are a nation of, you know, of diverse people. How do you represent, make sure that every community is represented? This is a conversation I think we need to have with that, with the mainstream audience. You know, it's a long shot, but I think that is something that needs to be done.
It's interesting that you bring up that idea because I've talked to several editors in mainstream publishing about that issue, and what they say is that they never receive manuscripts with that identity first of all, and then there's very few people actually within the mainstream publishing world who are in a position of authority that make those decisions as to what gets published that actually understand the Sikh identity. And if we ask the authors that they already represent to write those stories, will those authors' voices be authentic? Because we can include the Sikh identity in stories, but then it's not necessarily, it may not be authentic because the way they edit, they're going to ensure that it fits a mainstream message and that it will sell books at the end of the day because that's their primary goal. And if it's not something that's going to sell widely, then it's not normally something that they're going to consider seriously. I know in Canada, we don't have a lot of diversity within children's literature as far as the Sikh identity, and when Alliance Main, for example, was put forward to one of the largest agencies of children's literature in Canada, the main editor there said she didn't understand the identity, and so she thought it would be best suited to the Sikh population. So that was their response to that. So when we're having people in that kind of authority giving that sort of response, it shows that they have no information about who the Sikhs are, what they represent. And I found over the time that I write about this subject, I found that even major organizations misrepresent the Sikh identity as far as Vaisakhi. Vaisakhi is sometimes referred to as a Hindu festival on their multicultural calendar still, and these are main texts and magazines that go to all of the schools and education places in North America. So if we're not educating the educators, then I don't think we're going to have success when it comes to going to the publishers, because the educators say they're not getting those books because the publishers can't market them, so they don't hear about them.
Great point, Navjot. Thank you for sharing that.
And that's the challenge, is that, I think both of you particularly had mentioned that, needing to create your own publishing kind of press to make sure that, some of these voices can be heard. So what I'm hearing is that, we really need to grow our team so that we have the writers who are going to be writing internally, basically, within the Sikh community, who are going to be writing both for the internal community and the external community, and we ourselves publishing these, but then the other thing to maybe think about, which Parveen had brought up, is the idea of developing more technology-focused apps or technology-focused areas where, the older youth, that's what they're queuing into rather than maybe literature. Maybe someone can comment on that.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that's definitely an area that needs to be explored by all of us, and I think that's definitely the right direction to be going in, because I know with my son, he loves his iPad, so if we can bring more stories and applications in that format, it's only going to be beneficial.
That's true. I agree with Navjot Benji, because I know if you try to have the kids sit down and look through the Gada, they're very hesitant. But as soon as you pull out like an Udara app on whether the iPad or iPhone, and they can sit there for easily half an hour, just going through the Udara. So we do definitely need to go towards the technology side.
And
well, Robert,
yeah, go ahead.
He's been using I nickname, and that's how he teaches himself, everything that he needs. Because last year he asked to homeschool himself for a Culture school, and he used I nickname, and it was really honestly what worked for him, and he was able to identify with. Wow. And he always has the Gada with him.
Right. So I'm hoping that in the near future, very soon, we're going to be seeing some of these apps either amongst all you panelists or even others out there. We're running short on time. Anyone is interested, we'd be happy to take another question or a comment. What I might ask is if each panelist can take maybe a minute as a closing statement from each one of you, and then we will end the session and hope that you would sign up. So since I'm not getting any question in my chat message, let's go ahead and take 1 minute each, 1 minute or less, to maybe come up with a closing statement for each one of you. So maybe we can go in the same order that we began, which is with Navjot Benji, and then go on to Inni Benji, Jagdeep, and then Parveen.
I would like to thank the Sikh Research Institute for this opportunity, first of all, because I know for myself it's been very powerful to hear everybody else's story, and I think it's very important when we hear all of these stories to understand that this definitely is a collective journey. And if we want to provide those authentic resources for our children, we're going to have to do it together, and we have to support each other. So if I want to leave any kind of call to action at the end of this webinar, I would like to say that my dream of hope would be that we can continue to inspire new voices and artists and support each other to buy these books, purchase these books, and to value these books, because literacy should be not only an academic endeavor in our lives, it should be something that starts at home, and it should build language, discussion, dialogue around difficult issues. So it's very powerful in many different ways. So I'd really like to thank everybody who's participated, because I know that I've learned something new. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
How can you top that? I mean, Navjot, you have so eloquently said everything what I am feeling. It truly is an honor to be with all of you, and you know, and thank you, Sikh Research Institute, for providing this platform. At least it's nice to hear we all have these stories, and if the call of action, Navjot, for me, would be we need a distribution system. So please, if we can get somebody to work on that, we can produce, and I'm sure we can do everything, but we need somebody to handle the distribution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jagdeep ji?
मैं भी वही कहना सीगा जो ऑलरेडी कह चुकी है सारे सो यू नो मैं ही कहना सी कि ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਟੀਮ ਦੀ ਤਰਫੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਪਲੇਟਫਾਰਮ ਤੇ ਸੱਦਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਮੀਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਇਨੀ ਕੌਰ ਭੈਣ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਨਵਜੋਤ ਭੈਣ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਪਰਵੀਨ ਭੈਣ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਯੂ نو ਸਾਡਾ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਯੂ نو ਪਸੰਦ ਕਰੋਗੇ ਤੇ ਯੂ نو ਦ ਵੈਰੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਥਿੰਗ ਇਜ਼ ਕਿ ਇਨਕਰੇਜਮੈਂਟ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟਸ ਨੂੰ ਅਗਰ ਯੂ نو ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਕਿਤਾਬਾਂ ਹੋਣ ਤੇ ਜੋ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਭ ਨਾਲ ਇਫੈਕਟਿਵ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਟ ਤੇ ਵਿਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਯੂ نو ਉਹ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਮਾਲ ਹੈਗਾ and I'm sure ਸਾਰੇ ਦੀ ਕਿਤਾਬਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਮਾਲ ਤੇ ਦੇਖੀਆਂ ਹੈ so I would request everybody ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟਸ ਹੈ ਯੂ نو ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਨਕਰੇਜ ਕਰੋ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਜੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ
Thank you, Virji. Parveen Benji?
And of course, last but not least, I do want to thank you, Jasmine, for it and the Sikh Research Institute. This was a unique opportunity, and I think I did absolutely learn a lot. But for selfish reasons, I also really want more books and resources created so that my children have a richer, fuller library or set of resources for them to grow up with. And I am just so excited that Sikh Research Institute is taking on this effort of putting us all together so that we can actually talk about our experience and share with others and hopefully encourage and inspire others and inspire each other to work together, like the others said, so we can help each other distribute, we can help each other learn about other opportunities that are out there for the type of writing that each of us individually do. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you. I really, you know, it's so important that we come to the same platform and discuss openly, you know, what are our successes and what are our challenges and how we can learn from each other. Because like I kind of started out in the beginning, yes, each one of us want to do this for each one of our children, but each one of those children in every Sikh household is our child. So it takes a village, they say, to bring up a child, and my hope is that, you know, with my two twins, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to need the whole community behind us to be able to bring these children up, and whatever we need to do, whether it's an aspect of physical resources or technology or plays or music, then we need to put our hands and heads together and our hearts together, most importantly, and trust that we have the grace of the Guru, because without the grace of the Guru, none of this would even be possible. So thank you so much for accepting to take on this opportunity to come to the same platform. Like Jagdeep Virji said, the books, the resources can be purchased either at punjabmall.com or individually from the sites that have been made available. If you don't already have the resource, the first thing to do after this webinar is to actually go and purchase it. I proudly display them on my bookcases, and as the children grow, I'm hoping that we will be displaying them more. So once again, thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the attendees. On behalf of Sikh Research Institute, we really appreciate your time and please make sure you do fill out the testimonial and feedback form after this session that has ended. because that is how we know what else you want from us, what else you need from us, and how we can provide it for you. Thank you so very much to everyone, and particularly Harliv. I know we kind of threw you in there at the very end, so thank you for being a great sport as always. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Khalsa,
Vaheguru Ji Ki
Vaheguru
Fateh.
Ji ki
Right.